Hello and welcome to African Football HQ, the weekly podcast from Goal from African Football HQ, bringing you the biggest and the best news from the world of African football. I'm joined by Malik Shafai. How's it going, Malik?
I'm good, Ed. A lot to talk about this week.
Absolutely. And this week, we're going to start off by focusing on some of the players who moved clubs during the off-season. It feels, Malik, like we are at a point where we can judge, we can begin to assess how players are settling in. They're really kind of beginning to achieve and show us what they're capable of. And also particularly this weekend, it's been a weekend of big African performances from the new boys. So what we're going to do is we're going to each pick out two new signings who have impressed us so far this term. And we're also going to point out one player from whom much more was expected. So Malik, why don't you start us off? Give us the first name, the first new signing who's impressed you this season.
I'm going to have to go with Chelsea goalkeeper Edouard Mendy. The expectations weren't that high for him, but considering the low bar that Kepa set, but since he's come in, he's only conceded one goal, I believe. He's just been excellent on all fronts, and he's been such an improvement on Kepa and Caballero. He's made the Chelsea defense a lot stronger, in my opinion, and I think that's helped them so much so far, and I believe he'll continue to do that for the rest of the season, at least.
The great stat I saw is that in his last 6 games for Chelsea, Kepa's conceded 14 goals, I think, whereas Mendy has conceded 1. In his last 6 games. How much do you think we can attribute Chelsea's improved defensive performances to Mendy? Because I feel almost with Thiago Silva coming in, for example, with a slight change in approach, Kepa might feel a little bit hard done by that Mendy's getting a bit more protection than he is.
Yeah, definitely. But obviously Kepa's made so many mistakes last season, even at the beginning of this season. He'd had no right to deserve a starting spot for almost any Premier League side, let alone Chelsea. And Mendy is just coming from France. He was unemployed a few years ago, and now he's starting every week for one of the biggest clubs in the world and performing well in addition to that. So, yeah, Kepa, you could feel a bit hard done, but Mendy's performances have just been so much better, regardless of which defenders are in front of him.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really impressed with the way that Mendy has so quickly adapted to life in England, which is the same for my first pick. I'm also going to stick with the Chelsea theme, and I'm going to go with Hakim Ziyech. He was not a summer signing. Obviously, he arrived in February. He officially signed in February. But he's been made to wait to make his mark in this team, largely due to fitness problems, due to injury concerns. But I think we're really finally seeing just what he's capable of, the reasons exactly why Chelsea signed him. He scored against Krasnodar in midweek. Then again, he netted against Burnley in that 3-0 victory on Sunday. He also got an assist. He's the first Chelsea player in 6 years to score in his first 2 back-to-back starts for the club. And I expected great things from Ziyech, but I didn't expect he would start so strongly when he was finally fit.
He's just such a breath of fresh air in the Premier League. Just so many qualities, it's a great flair. You don't really see that in a lot of other players, especially someone like Mahrez who might be a bit skilly. I don't want to criticize Mahrez, but you don't really see the end product that Ziyech has. Brilliant goal against Burnley, good finish, and the pass for his assist was even better. I didn't think he would be able to replicate his performances at Ajax in a much better league such as the Premier League, but from what he's done so far, he's been excellent. It's only been 2 games, I believe, so we can't look into it too much, but he's been great so far.
There was something very reminiscent of Ajax about Chelsea's performance against Burnley. The formation, the 4-3-3 with Werner and Ziyech flanking Tammy Abraham, but also the rhythm, the speed, the way they were mixing up the passes in the final third. And I think Ziyech is the perfect guy to, he's quick under pressure, he's a quick thinker under pressure, and he can execute those difficult passes that the defenders aren't expecting. And the amount of times those poor Burnley defenders were expecting one thing, but then were turned a different way or found themselves tracking back to goal. I think he's going to be an absolutely lethal presence in the Premier League this season. And so he's certainly one of my 2 great signings so far. And I think now he has, in his last 40 games in all competitions for Chelsea and Ajax, he's had a hand in 30 goals, which is astonishing. I think when we were expecting, Dutch players arriving from the Dutch league don't always hit the ground running. Chelsea fans know in the form of Mattia Kesman how a big billing may not lead to big performances. But I can only have praise for Ziyech so far.
Yeah, I'm hoping he can keep up the good form, but I want to ask you, Ed, similarly to Mohamed Salah, who came to the Premier League the second time and did excellently with Liverpool, one player this season, the Golden Boot. Do you think Ziyech can replicate that? Maybe not winning the Golden Boot, but becoming one of the most influential players in the Premier League this season?
Can he become one of the most influential players in the Premier League this season? Yeah. Particularly because it's clear that Frank Lampard trusts him to play a really key role creatively in this Chelsea team. So he's going to be seeing a lot of the ball. He's going to have a big influence. I don't think he's going to win the Player of the Year because I think there is such a big weighting in either winning titles or in scoring a shed load of goals. And I don't think that Ziyech will do either this season.
Hopefully, he'll prove you wrong. For my next summer signing, I'm going to go with another Moroccan, Achraf Hakimi, who's been so excellent at Inter Milan so far. Seen him play on the right wing and the left wing back positions, so versatile. Everything about him is just so good. There's another fresh breath of air in football. I have to say, I can't put a fault to his name.
Do you think we should be reading something into the fact that all of these guys, they've started very strongly? Like there was almost no kind of transitional periods. Hakimi as well was scoring goals right from the off, looked very settled. Do you think the fact that there's no fans plays into that, or do you think the fact that we're in this kind of like people were in lockdown before, people were in very closed environments before, so the kind of some of the external factors that can influence a player maybe weren't there in the same extent? Do you think there's anything to be read into that, or do you have another theory as to why these guys are adapting so quickly?
I think with the exception of Mendy, these players are proven at the highest level. You can call them world class. If not, they're at the baseline of that. Like we'll talk about Osimhen later, he wasn't the most established player before, and that could be why he's potentially struggling. But with Hakimi, he's proved it with Dortmund for the past 2 seasons as one of the best fullbacks in the world. And so if you are the best in your position or top three in your position, it shouldn't be too hard to adjust to a new club. And especially since he's playing under Conte, who utilizes wingbacks a lot, he clearly wanted Hakimi. So that's another reason why I think he's adjusted so well initially.
My second pick as my signing who's impressed me so far this season is going to be Thomas Partey of Arsenal. One of the big transfer sagas of the off-season. He finally made that move on deadline day when he signed for 50 million euros, and he's proving to be a big hit. He is proving exactly why Arsenal signed him, and he's proving exactly why the Gunners for so long have needed that commanding midfield presence. He was influential again against Manchester United. It didn't help poor Paul Pogba, hapless Paul Pogba, that his opposite man was so imposing. But just the way Partey beats his man, driving through the middle of the park, he registered over 93% pass accuracy, which is the highest of any Arsenal starter. Roy Keane, not an easy man to impress, was even drawing parallels with Patrick Vieira after the match. And I know you're very excited about the Partey El Neni partnership in midfield, but I think Partey alone, before you move on to El Neni, Partey alone deserves immense credit for how he's settled down and just gone about proving his class.
Yeah, he hasn't played too much yet, we have to say, but defensively is obviously solid. But what he brings going forward, we haven't seen from an Arsenal midfielder in quite a long time. So his combination of defense and attack, you don't really see it almost anywhere else in the Premier League. So obviously it's a huge boost to Arsenal and such an improvement over the likes of Granit Xhaka or Ceballos. But seeing him against Man United, El Neni playing more reserved, freeing Partey to go forward, we just saw him break out a bit. Like just great passes all along, so many long balls, very creative. I'm struggling to think of negative things about him. He played excellently. But I want to talk about his partnership with El Neni, though.
I mean, defensively, he made 4 tackles. I think he made 2 further interceptions. So we are seeing, as you point out, that kind of perfect blend of an offensive difference maker, but also someone who is going to win the ball back, who is going to win those battles. And looking at the stats from Partey's performance against United, how energetic and invigorated he was, I think they were the kinds of performances, I hate to say it, we were maybe hoping to see from Naby Keita when he arrived at Liverpool from Leipzig all those years ago. And sadly, whereas Partey has established himself so quickly, we still haven't seen, or we see very rarely, those kind of dominant performances from Keita.
Yeah, I think it helps that Arsenal kind of needed a player like Partey while Liverpool already had a quite established midfield. So I think that plays a role into it. But once again, it has been only a few games, but he's just been excellent so far. So from what we've seen, there's no reason to believe he'll decline.
I would say the opposite almost. I feel that the fact that Partey's come into a side who, while much improved, were until very recently fairly dysfunctional, and now they look like outstanding against United. They looked more committed. They looked hungrier. They looked like they wanted it. They looked like they had a plan all of a sudden. Whereas United were made to look really like they were just drifting at times. Whereas Keita came into a midfield that was there was already a template for that team. They were already very successful. So I don't know. I see your point, but I feel almost that the fact that Arsenal needed a player like that is more to Partey's credit, with the fact that he's already running the show against Manchester United.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's the final piece to the puzzle for this Arsenal squad, but he raises the baseline so much, Ed.
What if you stuck Koulibaly in that defence? Would that be the final piece of the puzzle?
I don't know. Gabriel played quite well. Maybe he could replace Rob Holding. But I want to talk about Mohamed El-Neni. He came to Arsenal almost 5 years ago. I began following them because of him. And I swear to you, almost every game I would watch Arsenal fan TV, look at the reactions to see what people said about El-Neni. I would go on Twitter after every game to see what people are saying. And after nearly 5 years, he's finally done it. Great performance. He's had some good performances before, but after going on loan, being reserved to a bench role, seeing if he'll move to China or Turkey, started against Man United, played the full 90 minutes. And I don't know if you saw the video of him pressing in the 91st minute that went viral, but it's just a testament to how much energy he has, what he brings to the team. Obviously, technically, he's not the best. I was talking to my friend and he said he's arguably the worst player on the ball in this whole, out of the whole 22 men, but the energy he brings, his IQ of the game is quite solid. So I'm obviously very excited, as you can tell. I've been waiting for such a long time. I thought Partey would take Elneny out of the squad if he even had a spot in the squad in the first place, but seeing them together is ecstasy, Ed.
Yeah, you're like a little excited puppy when you start talking about El-Neni. Do you think now, after this performance, Partey El-Neni is the first choice midfield partnership, or do you still think that we're going to see Partey Xhaka or Partey Ceballos more often?
I wish I could say so. I think El-Neni is good in these away matches against the top six sides and the energy he has, because they don't really rely on him to attack too much. They want him to stay reserved. But if, say, in their next game they're playing a worse team, I wouldn't be surprised if Arteta brings in someone like Ceballos or Xhaka to replace him, unfortunately.
Okay, well, enough about Mohamed El-Neni. Unfortunately, not all the big summer signings have worked out. So I'm going to come on to the players who have disappointed us. But first of all, I want to give a shout out to some of the other guys who have, they didn't make our top two, they've not made our top four deals of the summer, but they have impressed quickly after moving to new clubs. One is John Obi Mikel, particularly someone who stands out for me. I think we kind of knew what we were getting when he returned to Stoke, but there were some questions about that move. There were some questions about whether it was ambitious enough, whether they were a club on going down. But actually, he's looked excellent. He's such a class player in the Championship. One of those players who always looks like he has so much time on the ball. And he seems to boost everyone around him. It does seem to make those Stoke players swell when they've got Obi Mikel alongside them in the midfield. And I also want to give a shout out to the Fulham pair, Ola Aina and Ademola Lookman, both of whom, intriguingly, they have quite a similar story in that they both kind of didn't make it in English football. They went abroad, and now they're back. They find themselves back at Fulham, both in the Nigeria reckoning, hopefully soon in the case of Lookman. And they've both found the net in the last 3 games for Fulham. They've had decisive hand in the Cottagers getting some points on the board. And I've been really impressed with what I've seen from those two. And suddenly there's a bit of optimism about Fulham again.
Yeah, Aina's scoring his first goal in English football after so many seasons. And what a goal it was, Ed.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. He started that move. Some great interplay with Mitrovic was influential with the assist. And when Aina is unleashed like that, that left foot, I think he's a really talented player. And I actually wish that Gernot Rohr used him a bit more consistently and perhaps a bit more effectively. I wonder whether his versatility has counted against him a little bit when it's come to the Super Eagles.
Yeah, be on the lookout for our international preview episode coming next week. Also, to break the trend of Nigerian players, I want to bring up Alfred Gomis, who moved to Stade Rennais, and we're going to see two Senegalese goalkeepers face off in the Champions League for what I have to say must be the first time when Chelsea take on Rennais. Mendy, as we talked about before, will be taking on Gomis, and that'll be a momentous occasion for Senegalese football, I have to say.
Yeah, a real landmark. We also saw that's a group full of African goalkeepers, isn't it? Because obviously Bonu played against Mendy in that first game, Sevilla Chelsea. I don't know who Krasnodar have got in net, but maybe they could look at.
I doubt it.
No, they don't have an African player, but I'm just trying to think of a few African goalkeepers who could do a job for them. What's your friend El Hadri doing these days?
I was just thinking about him. Would have been nice to see him in the Champions League.
Yeah, he's too Krasnodar, I think.
All right. Well, we'll move on to some of our, not flops, but transfers who haven't lived up to expectations so far. I'm going to start with Victor Osimhen. We've talked about him endlessly on this show. But 1 goal, 1 red card. It's not looking great for him so far. Do you agree, Ed?
Mixed. I think 1 goal in, 6 or 7 games so far, 1 in 7, I think it isn't obviously not great, is concerning, needs to improve, especially for the fee. However, a lot of the performances when he hasn't scored have actually been pretty strong performances, such as when he came off the bench in that opener against Parma and was influential. When even in defeat against Sassuolo, that was obviously a dreadful result, but I think he was one of the few Napoli players who could actually emerge from that game with his head held high. You mentioned the red card against Sociedad, and that is obviously worrying and disappointing. But I remain optimistic because I think Gattuso really loves this project. He loves what he's got in the form of Osimhen, the way he can use him in his team. And so I remain optimistic. My concern about this one is the fee, because I think had it been for half the price, I think, 1 in 7, you could put it down to a lot of things, but it's just the price tag that makes it such a high pressure situation for him.
Yeah. From what I've watched of Napoli so far, even when he's not scoring, I noticed that he's getting a lot of shots off. So it's not like he's one of those strikers who'll go completely missing the whole game. He has an eye for goal. He's able to get the ball in good positions. And while the shots might not go in or be at a great angle, it's good to see that he's at least getting shots off and he's not going completely missing.
Yeah, although he did, I think against Sassuolo, he had 8 shots and only 2 of them were on target. So yeah, he's getting in the right positions, but at the end of the match, there was a reason why Gattuso was specifically criticising Napoli's finishing, and Osimhen was, I think, one of the main culprits there. But that's something that can be massively affected by confidence. If you're not believing in yourself, if you're not kind of confident you're going to hit the target, you're going to find the back of the net, then you maybe are snatching at chances. You're not taking that extra breath. Or inversely, you are taking that extra breath. You are overthinking things and hesitating, and you lose that instinct. So, yeah, we'll have to see. Early days, but one to be monitored now, I think.
Yeah, like I said, he wasn't really the most established player in the world, and I think that's why it's taking him some time to adjust, which we should give to him. It's not like he's planning on leaving Napoli anytime soon. So I think he has a lot of time this season and in the rest of his time at Napoli to get on the goal sheet more, but I'm hoping he can improve.
That's what they said about Kepa after his slow start at Chelsea.
Nigerians are a different breed, Ed. I'm sure you're aware.
Unfortunately, I'm going to stick with the Nigerian theme for my flop. Again, very early days, but Eberechi Eze in his 6 performances so far for Palace, he started twice. There's been no assist, no goal. I feel hypercritical saying this, but I guess I'd expected a little more of those flashes of excellence in the top flight. Both Eze and Benrahma. I'm going to follow these 2 players throughout the season and compare them a lot because of what they achieved in the Championship, because of the hype around their moves, because they've made quite similar profile moves. And both of them so far, obviously Benrahma waited till very late to make the move, but so far neither of them have really shown anything of what they can do at their new club. So hopefully the next time we do this review in 6 weeks' time, we'll have a few more positive things to say about those 2.
Hopefully. Yeah, Eze hasn't gotten a lot of chances coming off the bench mainly. Maybe he's underperforming in practice, or maybe the players ahead of him are just so strong, but there is time for him to improve like most of these players. So once again, I am hoping he can improve. Now on to our beloved Eyes on Africa section, where we highlight the biggest stories going on in football on the African continent. We're going to start with the blockbuster move of Black Stars legend Asamoah Gyan returning to the Ghana Premier League 17 years after leaving Liberty Professionals to join Legon Cities FC. He's going to be earning 200K a month. It's a blockbuster move in terms of popularity, but also finances, considering how much he's making. I'm really excited to see him. I haven't watched any GPL before, so I'm hoping he can attract my eyes and some more viewers to the league.
Yeah, I fear that the league might not be in the right state to accommodate a player of his stature. It's not like he's coming to a league which is in a good shape after several years of growth and they're ready to go to the next level. The last few years for the Ghana Premier League, for all kinds of different reasons, not least because of COVID, has really been in disarray. And so while this is a great move to, as you say, put more eyeballs on the product, I just wonder whether it will end in tears or whether it is something that will actually have a tangible impact in the growth of the league. Cities are very ambitious. Previously known as All Stars, they were champions, I think, in 2016. So they're not, even though they've had a rebrand, they're not a kind of new club just starting out. So in that sense, it's a very exciting move. It's interesting to see how they can kind of establish the Ghana's biggest clubs. But I'm not totally optimistic that this is going to be a long-term thing. I'm also a little bit disappointed because at 34, I still feel that maybe he had another year or two left in him in Europe.
I don't know about that.
I would have loved to have seen him come back to English football, maybe had a go at Middlesbrough or back in the Championship somewhere. So we'll have to see how it goes.
I think maybe Sunderland League One might have been more fitting for him, but he was released from his club in the Indian League. I really don't think he's at the level of European football. So I think this is a bit of a low stakes move for him. We talked about how he was linked to Egyptian side Wadi Degla a few months back. So it didn't seem like he was going to move to some big club. I think a return to Ghana is great, especially the project that Legon Cities had. As you've mentioned, he's also joined by a lot of new signings. So I feel like it's a bit low stakes, not for Legon Cities, considering how much money they're spending on him. But expectations for him weren't that high as to where he would move next. And in a league like Ghana, I'm assuming he'll be at the top of the scorers chart, and it'll be a nice boost of ego and probably closer to his family as well.
Yeah, we'll have to see how he enjoys the pitches and the travel. But something that's got me really excited about this move, it made me think about which African players also came home, because it's something that we see quite a lot of in European football, where players end their careers in this romantic sense. They return to their boyhood club and they come a full circle. Some fantastic examples in European football. Some of the most some really emotional moments is when fans get that one final chance to see their beloved hero once again. In a few cases, it's happened in African football as well. We recently talked about Shabalala, the South Africa hero of the 2010 World Cup, obviously a peer of Gyan in that respect. And he's returned to Amazulu, to the PSL. PSL, I think, because it's at such a different stage of its development to the Ghana Premier League, for example, has attracted these players with more regularity. We've seen Benny McCarthy returning. We've seen Stephen Pienaar, Aaron McQuena. So it is a well-worn path for big Bafana stars to end their playing careers in the PSL. But we've also seen it elsewhere with Dennis Oliek, for example, returning to Kenya. And Rashidi Yakini, who played for Julius Berger in Nigeria late on in his career, having been such a star in Europe. So I'm glad to see such a big name like Gyan returning home. Hopefully it goes well, and hopefully this could be the start of a trend of African players returning to play in their homelands before they hang up their boots. Are there any others who you would like to see, any other African greats who you would like to see return to their homeland, return to their boyhood club perhaps, and end their playing days in front of their own fans?
In the ideal world, everyone. Imagine how great the CAF Champions League would be if we see the likes of Osimhen, Mohamed Salah, Sadio Mane playing for their home countries in a few years. But it's very unrealistic. I can't imagine Mohamed Salah ever returning to Egypt to play football. for a club. Even the relationship with the EFA is so poor that there were links of him not playing with the national team again. So I can't really imagine a player like him coming back to the Egyptian Premier League. But the possibilities with this are endless. So many players. Like, imagine what Sadio Mane would do for the quality of domestic Senegalese football, Ed.
Terrifying. I don't know. I'd love to see Salah back in Ahly or Zamalek. Do you know? Imagine the atmosphere in Cairo International Stadium when he turns out for one of those two against the other one in a massive derby. I mean, that would be the stuff of dreams. I don't know. Just imagine that homecoming in front of a packed stadium full of Egyptian fans and actually gracing one of these two massive establishments. I'd love to see Adel Taarabt return. I mean, not return because he was born in France, but end his career with a stint in Morocco. I think that's something which, in the same way that Anthony van den Borre played in Mazembe after he'd achieved such success with Anderlecht. Even though he was born in Belgium, I believe, raised in Belgium, he still returned to Congo because he wanted to experience life there and play for an institution. And I would love to see Taarabt turn out for either Wydad or probably ideally Raja. I think. Imagine Taarabt running the show for Raja Casablanca in the CAF Champions League semis.
I have to say, a lot of these players aren't returning to their original club that they played for, but more so going to a different club in the same league. And additionally, they're not moving to some of the biggest clubs in the league. So Shabalala, he didn't move to Kaizer Chiefs or Sundowns. He went to more of a lowly side like Amazulu. Do you think this is like to have less expectations or what, Ed?
I think it's mainly a question of timing, perhaps. I think that when Shabalala was a free agent, was looking for a return, for example, Amazulu were the ambitious project who put something on the table in front of him. Transfers can sometimes just work like that. Just who is available. Transfers, like marriage, I think, can work like that, and who is available in the right place at the right time. But also, it's a very much an economic situation as well. And also, I think a lot of Africa's players left Africa so young. Not obviously Shabalala, but players left so young that there's maybe not that kind of sense of homecoming that you might have had when Joe Cole returned to West Ham or Robbie Fowler returned to Liverpool, for example, somewhere where they played hundreds of games and were already an icon. I mean, these guys left, a lot of them as very young men, prospects, and are returning as veterans.
Yeah, and then another move out of the blue is Ghana midfielder Sully Muntari moving to Maritzburg United in the PSL. That kind of came out of nowhere because obviously he's not from South Africa, so you have to question that move a little bit. But that move has not gone through yet, but hoping it does. That'd be very interesting.
Well, it's kind of out of the blue, but he has been linked with a move back to Africa for a long time, back to Ghana or back to PSL and specifically Kaizer Chiefs. But yeah, it'll be a really interesting move for Maritzburg United, who this week sold Kenya defender Brian Mandela to Sundowns. So that's an interesting move to watch as well. A really towering centre-back, a real hero with the Harambee Stars, and someone who I believe is ready to make the step up to play at one of South Africa's biggest clubs.
All right, we'll stay on the South African theme a bit and talk about Gaston Sirino, Mamelodi Sundowns Uruguayan maestro, who is now linked to a move to Ahly. Peter Mosimane said he wanted to bring Sirino along with him from Cape Town to Cairo. But this has to be one of the biggest moves, going from an African club to another African club. A rumored fee of around £3 million. That's blockbuster by African standards, Ed.
Yeah, it's the kind of signing we maybe only see between the North African clubs. The rare player who comes along who commands above $1 million, but not quite in this ballpark. I think it's really exciting. It's really exciting in the way that perhaps the Mosimane move opens up a different channel between two of Africa's biggest leagues. We saw earlier with Makhlambi, who returned from Egypt to South Africa, and I think we'll find that actually that there's not a huge amount of difference in the quality of the teams who populate those divisions. And I hope it opens the door to some more big Cape to Cairo, as you put it, transfers, or even Cairo to Cape. I'd love to see Ramadan Sobhi turn out for Cape Town City FC, for example. I think he'd
be a good fit for the PSL with his flair. Imagine he stands on the ball, all the fans would go crazy, Ed.
Maybe that's where we should send Taarabt. We should send Taarabt to the PSL. He would be the Mzansi king.
Yeah, if we bring just all the showboaters, all the flary players back to South Africa. But back to Sirino, such an excellent player. In this season's CAF Champions League, he had 2 goals, 3 assists, averaging almost 3 key passes per game. You don't really see this from any African playmakers, and he's just a level above everyone else. Arguably one of the best players in the competition itself. And there's a reason why Peter Mosimane and Ahly really want him.
It's maybe even a surprise that he's not moving to Europe, if indeed Sundowns are willing to sell him. But I think maybe there's a case that clubs in Europe are less willing to take older players from the PSL, whereas from North African leagues, specifically Egypt, they might be more willing to take players who have passed a certain age threshold. But it'll be great to see the two of them link up together, and great to see how one of the PSL's leading marksmen transfers his form to the Egyptian top flight.
Judging by Ahly's chaotic nature, I wouldn't be surprised if they sign him and he's gone within a year. But hoping for the best if the move does materialize. We'll conclude this episode with some transfer talk. It's crazy to think that we're in November and there's already a done deal. Central African Republic midfielder Jeffrey Kondogbia has moved to one of Europe's biggest clubs, hasn't he, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, he's leaving one of Europe's biggest clubs in Valencia, but certainly a switch to Atletico Madrid is a step up. He arrives as the replacement for Thomas Partey. I understand for an initial fee of 10 million euros, although there is some debate online as to exactly what the fee is. But this is a deal that makes complete sense for both parties, really, particularly Atletico, because you're buying a player. He knows the league well. He's familiar with the Champions League. He is a proven commodity. You know what he's about.
Yeah, disappointing stint at Inter Milan, but at Valencia has been a different player. He scored that screamer in the Champions League last season against Lille, I believe. So he has a lot to him as a player. I'm very excited to see him under Diego Simeone.
Yeah, it was interesting that Kondogbia and Pogba were obviously the midfield heartbeat of France's youth team that won the World Cup. And at the time, the two of them were seen largely as equals. They were both seen as kind of the future of French football, parallels with Patrick Vieira. And now one of them is being outclassed by Thomas Partey, and one of them is being bought as a cheap replacement for Thomas Partey. So it's interesting how things work out.
Yeah. All right. We'll move on to our next. This is a transfer rumor. Huge one. Samu Chukwueze going from Villarreal to Manchester United. This is, I don't know what to make of this, Ed.
It's an interesting rumour. Big things have been expected of Chukwueze since he arrived at Villarreal. He has been linked with bigger clubs. However, if I'm the owner, or if I'm the director of football or the head of recruitment at one of Europe's giants, I'm probably going to look elsewhere, because his goal on Monday night was his first goal in a year, and it's simply not a good enough record for a wide man, in my opinion. He doesn't make enough contribution in the final third, and that's something I think he needs to get right before he's being considered by Europe's royalty.
Yeah, I believe he's lost the starting spot at Villarreal, if I'm not mistaken, under Emery. But he was once regarded as one of the best players coming out, like one of the best young African players. So I'm kind of curious what went wrong. Obviously, his end product is lacking a little bit, and I really don't think he's at the level of Manchester United just yet. But there has to be something in there that creates that rumor, doesn't there?
I think it can be hard to find consistency, particularly as a young player, particularly in such a demanding league. It's not easy to just be a very talented player and make a difference in every game in the Spanish top flight. So hopefully Emery can unlock that in him, that can find that consistency. An excellent left-footed finish on Monday night, and we just now need to see it next week and the week after and the week after. And then that's when we start talking about Manchester United and the like.
All right. We'll conclude with our final transfer rumor. Move on to our final transfer rumor. Ghanaian English fullback Tariq Lamptey linked to Atletico Madrid. This is huge. Imagine if we've seen a Ghanaian at Atletico Madrid already, but moving from Brighton to there is a huge step, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the scale of club, it's a big step. But moving from the Premier League to La Liga, I don't think is such a huge step in terms of the level. We've seen lots of players do it. And obviously he would be going to Atletico Madrid to compete with Kieran Trippier, who's a player who's made a very successful move from England to Spain. I'd love this one. I'd love to see a player of Lamptey's profile, his very unique pathway to this level. I'd love to see a player like that at Atletico Madrid, but maybe we should be talking about that in a year's time, or give him a season at Brighton, a full season at Brighton, I think, and then let's talk about moving on.
Should we get into his international future?
No, but maybe you could talk about will Chelsea? There's quite a nice starting with Chelsea's good transfer deals and ending with one maybe got away.
Okay. Camera. And what'd you finish saying?
Give him a year.
Okay.
Give him this season. Let him get a full season at Brighton, and then let's talk.
Camera. He's been excellent since the lockdown. Like you said, it might be a bit too premature to link him to one of Europe's biggest clubs. But I want to ask you, Ed, will Chelsea regret this decision, especially if he moves, if he makes a blockbuster move just a year or two after leaving Chelsea?
Interesting. To be honest, I thought Lamptey would be a very good player. I didn't necessarily believe he would be Chelsea level. So when he left, I thought that it was understandable. It can help him get back to a higher level, but maybe not kind of a Premier League title contender. However, based on his performances this season, if he can maintain that through the winter into the spring, then it doesn't seem so far-fetched.
I just think he's a different player to Kieran Trippier. Obviously, Trippier known for his crossing, is on the ball, but Lamptey, while he has been great, he's had a few assists, forcing some own goals. He doesn't have that whip of the ball that Trippier has. He's more of a defensive player who can bring something going forward, but I don't think he's equivalent to Trippier in that realm yet.
True, but like you say, it's early days, but also it's quite good to have fullbacks who offer different things, like, one who goes inside, one who goes outside. That can actually be an advantage, particularly for a club like Atletico who will be competing on multiple fronts. Sometimes you are playing teams where they are the same level as you, whereas sometimes you're playing teams who you need to you're going to be dominating and you need to find that breakthrough. So I think having a plethora of different options is the way to go.
All right, that concludes this week's episode 19. Episode 20 will be a big one. We'll be previewing the international window as AFCON qualifiers return. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Ed. We'll see you next week.